Welcome back to CoinDesk Live. I'm Jen Sanasie, bringing you special sessions from our policy and regulation event in Washington, D.C., so you all can enjoy some of the sessions at home. Joining us remotely now to share their views on this year's policy progress are two spectacular guests. Chris Perkins, the president and managing partner at CoinFund, and a member of the CFTC's Global Markets Advisory Committee, joins us, along with Hermine Wong, a lecturer at Berkeley School of Law and former special counsel at the SEC. Hello to you both.
Hi.
Hi, Jen. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for being here. Today's been all about crypto regulation and policy and the progress that we've made this year. Hermine, I'm going to kick it to you first. Talk to me about what you make of the SEC's progress this year. Of course, we've had the roundtables. I believe Commissioner Peirce told me there's a crypto roadshow going on right now, Project Crypto. A lot has happened.
A lot has happened, and a lot has happened even without, as we remember from the Gensler days, the talk that there's no new authority, right? Like we haven't actually had new legislation yet. And the reality is that the SEC has been able to do a lot. And I don't think that Project Crypto or the roundtables are just a bunch of hot air for hot air's sake, right? And we've been seeing a different version of statements coming out to offer clarity to the market. They've been dropping both the ones that I think you mentioned earlier about tokenization, for example, when things started looking like it might be going sideways and the SEC was like, no, tokenization of securities, still securities, right? But we've also seen the joint statement from the SEC and CFTC staff recently about spot markets. And so I think that it's a very exciting time. It's especially exciting for, I think, startups to be able to offer more of their perspective with the roadshow that the crypto task force is doing. And I think it's really commendable for Commissioner Peirce to go on the road and get those perspectives that are beyond the DC lobbyist perspectives.
You mentioned something that I think is important for the audience at home to understand. It's that we don't actually have legislation yet, but still progress is being made on a regulatory front. What does that mean? I mean, when do we get that legislation, and how does that change how agencies like this SEC and CFTC operate from that point forward?
Man, that is a good poly market question, right? Like, when will the Clarity Act or some market structure bill happen? We all know that Trump wants it on his desk by September 30th, he said, but we've got a deadline for the budget for all of the federal government also looming, and that's where Congress is focused right now. We just saw some market principles drop from the Senate Dems. So, it could be something that after this budget negotiation happens, and assuming that there's no big government shutdown, that maybe we'll see it by the end of the year, which would be actually very exciting, because then what we'll be seeing is not just SEC staff statements and CFTC staff statements, but we'll be seeing actual rules come in place, and we'll be seeing what does a kind of crypto ATS, alternative trading system, really look like? What does registration for a crypto security or a crypto commodity start looking like?
Chris, I want to kick it to you, and then I want to get back to some of the points Hermine made, but talk to us from a CFTC perspective, and if you want to add the SEC in there, you have free reign, but what do you make of the progress we've seen this year?
Yeah, I mean, this has been 180 degrees from where we were under the Gary Gensler regime, where it was like this Robespierre era of like terror. So thank you so much to Chairman Atkins, Commissioner Peirce, Mike Seelig, for returning things back to normal. Right. I think we get gaslit into believing that this was the way it always was, where, you're getting it, where people tell you to come in to register and then throw get you in trouble right after that and pursue enforcement action. To the contrary, like this is the way it should be. It's wonderful when your regulator calls you and says, hey, I'm trying to think about how to solve this really difficult problem. Can we think about it together? How do you see it? How can we work together with the private sector to make this happen? I've had numerous conversations with the crypto task force, with the chairman himself. It has been wonderful. On the CFTC side, very similar engagement from Chairman Pham. Outstanding engagement. And look, they're working together. The CFTC and the SEC used to have a joint committee where they would tackle difficult regulatory challenges. I think it was back to 2014. And then they're like, oh, we don't need to do this anymore. Like, huh. Now they're starting to come together. They're issuing joint guidance. They're pursuing principles. And again, this is normal. This is the way it should be. The way it was in the last 4 years was the way was the anomaly. So very bullish. Obviously, we have some challenges in the CFTC. There's a lot of questions around turnover. At the end of the day, things are getting done. I'm very, very bullish now that we're seeing and yes, I think Hermine mentioned about legislation. I personally, I was in DC on Friday. There's a lot of excitement. There's a lot of hope. I'm a little bit more on the skeptical side of things. I'm not sure if things get done. That will be very beneficial because you'll have something enshrined, but legislation is really tough. It's just great to see there being a degree of normalization and precedent setting in the interim.
Chris, what happens if it doesn't get done in your perspective? Of course, of course you can't predict, but like in your head, what happens if it doesn't get done?
Well, we'll have good precedent because for the next 3 years at least, we're going to have agencies that are working together to come up with great rule sets that really chart a course and establish precedent, maybe what's a commodity and what's a security. It's hard to unwind when those things happen. That's one of the reasons I'm really focused on futures markets right now. Futures markets are run by the CFTC. They were stopped. They were stopped in their tracks by the SEC because during the self-certification process, the SEC would say, no, you can't have a future, that we think it's a security, so it stopped. And because we lack futures in this country beyond some of the majors, it hurts our ETFs. It hurts whether something's a commodity or not. It hurts basis trading. It hurts institutional adoption. So these are the types of things that'll get worked out. And when we have robust futures, and then you'll have that precedent. It's hard to wind it back. And so in the absence of law, 3 years of precedent setting, and hopefully some of that gets to become normal practice.
Chris just mentioned CFTC Acting Chair Caroline Pham, who I believe is the last member left in the commission over at the CFTC. We're down to a one-member commission. This legislation that we're talking about, that we have been talking about all day today, relies heavily on the CFTC to oversee this industry. Talk to me about how you're making sense of this. This is a conversation I had with Eleanor earlier on in the program for our audience that joined, but curious to hear your perspective from where you sit.
Yeah, so for anyone who's been following some of the CFTC politics, it's generally a 5-person commission. Last week, the second to last commissioner had her last day, Kristen Johnson. And so now it is just down to Caroline Pham. And commissions aren't designed to work by one commissioner, right? So what we want to see, and the reason why we want that, is that these are meant to be deliberative bodies. So putting that aside, that friction right now, the reality is that the CFTC is just down staff too. They've cut by 15%. If they're going to have new legislation to grant them oversight over a $4 trillion crypto market that operates 24/7, and none of the legislation we've seen gives them more budget or more staff, this is going to be crazy because this is a very technical area. And it's important to remember that the CFTC at its core is an agriculture committee, right? That's why, or agriculture agency. That's why it is overseen by the Senate Ag Committee and the House Ag Committee. They like their pork bellies and their orange juice concentrate, and that's where their staff's expertise is.
Yeah, but we have AI now, right? So we don't need as many people, I hope.
Okay, let's see how well the CFTC can use AI, considering that, the poor SEC, as we know, just deleted inadvertently a year's worth of Gensler's text messages. That's their OIT over there. You can't tell me that the CFTC, who has a sixth of the budget, has a better OIT system.
Did you say inadvertently? Did I hear that right?
Yes, that is what the OIG report is saying.
Maybe Chris has some insight he's not telling us about as to what's going on over at the CFTC. Okay, Hermine, you outlined a good point there, and it did seem like Brian Quintenz was moving along in the process to be confirmed, and that kind of got halted abruptly. Chris, curious to hear your perspective here. How important is it that we get a chairman at the CFTC and we start moving forward?
Look, chairman is leadership always matters. I've known Brian Quintenz for many, many years. I consider him a friend. and he's someone I look up to. He has the right disposition to really drive an agenda, and that's what the chairman does. They set the agenda and they drive it. I think he's tremendous. I hope he gets confirmed. If not, I hope they identify somebody who can do the same. But yeah, that position's super critical. People don't know much about the CFTC. It's kind of a lesser known kind of regulator. But gosh, to Hermine's point, we're putting $4 trillion in market cap in their hands, right? And that I don't think we're going to stop at 4 trillion. I think we're going north. So we really need to make sure that this regulatory body is equipped, to her point.
All right, let's move on to some legislation now. Hermine, I want to kick it back to you. I know you recently published an article outlining the Genius Act for busy people, and I think the people who watch this show are busy people, so I want to dig into that. It was published on the Digital Assets Council of Financial Professionals website, and you outlined some big holes in the Genius Act. I think it's pertinent to talk through those as we, hear some of the conversations that are coming out of the event today. Talk about where it's doing well. Talk to us about where you think we could be doing better.
Yeah, there's a lot of holes in the Genius Act. So one, we've certainly focused on the issuers, but there's no focus on the secondary markets, right? That's one big issue that is glaring. There's also, as we know, no FDIC insurance. So the general public might think, hey, this is something that now is getting regulated by all the financial agencies, Treasury, the Fed is involved. Like, this must be FDIC insurance. It's not. And unless you might be crypto native, right? And we start wanting real world adoption by the general public, that's going to be a stumbling block that we haven't addressed. There's also the depegging risk, right? There are going to be events that are out of control, like Circle depeg during the Silicon Valley Bank crisis, right? Circle's a good actor, we would believe, right? But what if there are some lesser known actors who depeg? There's no consequences and there's no protection, right? That this isn't bankruptcy remote yet. In fact, that means that while someone who holds a stablecoin might have a super claim, it's still not an ownership claim. So they still have to go behind this line of creditors, not at the end, they're at the beginning, but it's a creditor line. It's not instant access back to your money.
You also outlined in your article the high compliance costs, creating a regulatory barrier, potentially stifling innovation. And so much of the conversation we've had today has been about bringing innovation back to American shores. Talk to me a little bit about that and how we should be thinking about it.
Yeah, compliance costs are no joke in the financial system. And right now, they are in the Genius Act baking in really high compliance costs, right? And I don't want to suggest that compliance costs or compliance isn't a great thing in it itself. It is important in financial services. But one of the things that it does is requires these monthly reports. It requires reports that are audited by one of the big four. And you could imagine that instead of requiring that, maybe there's a world to get on-chain instant transparency in real time, right? And they're not incentivizing that. They are instead baking in this kind of old school compliance process into what they say is this new technology, not taking advantage of what the technology could offer.
If I can unpack that a little bit more, after Dodd-Frank, we saw the exact same thing. We took $700 trillion of derivatives from unregulated to regulated. We forced clearing of them. And what did we see? We saw all the clearing members disappear. Why? Because regulation results in a very high fixed cost. And then it's just a business of scale because your revenue gets squeezed to zero. And so you have to be big to survive. So I do think there's going to be consolidation in the stablecoin space. I don't know if there's a way around it. I'm more bullish, I think, on the stablecoin regulations, maybe than Hermine. I think this is like a defining moment for the U.S. dollar. We're going to see $3 trillion coming into the system. That's an amazing thing for the dollar. We're going to be exporting the dollar more than we've ever exported before. It's going to become a tool of probably monetary policy for the Treasury as well, and it's going to force buying of our debt, which is a good thing if you're the United States government. So I'm pretty excited about the policy aspects of the Genius Act.
Chris, you say you believe we're going to see consolidation in stablecoins. What does that look like for you? Because right now it feels like there are so many stablecoins. I hear about a new stablecoin every day. It is across multiple different chains. We have big centralized players getting into stablecoins now. What does that consolidation look like to you?
Yeah, I mean, there's a big race right now within the Hyperlink ecosystem of a stablecoin. But generally, what happens is that, like I said, high fixed costs, people get squeezed on margin, so you have to scale. Ultimately, I think there'll be a handful of major international players. There'll be some smaller ecosystem plays where it's like you go into an arcade and you got to use their token because if you go into that arcade, they're going to want to make the spread. And so I would imagine a bunch of smaller issuers in like, niche type ecosystems, but then like maybe 2 to 3 like big global players.
Chris, I know that you told me before we started here, you have a lot to say about privateers. I don't know what that is, so just hit us with it and let's get this conversation going.
That's because you're Canadian. No, we love the Canadians, and I hope what I say doesn't upset you. But one of the things that concerns me most, and I'm a Marine, I'm a naval officer, is that you have $3 trillion coming into the system, and I will tell you that we're woefully unprepared from a national security perspective. You have the North Koreans, you have Lazarus Group that are licking their chops. They just did the Bybit hack. Things are looking great. Published an article with Christian Carlo in February. Long story short, we think the solution to these problems lies in our past. And if you study our history, one of the reasons we really won the Revolutionary War was because we issued something called letters of marque and reprisal that commissioned private ship captains to go out and wage war against British commerce. It effectively turns your defense, the best defense is a good offense. So the idea here is to go on the attack, to commission private citizens to go on offense. In doing so, they can violate certain rules, like sanctions, for example. We did it again in the War of 1812, and that helped us there. And frankly, our founding fathers loved privateering so much, it's in our Constitution. So the thesis is go back to the past, leverage the powers in the Constitution. I think Congress is kind of into this because we have to solve for security. And the way to do so is not to spend a whole bunch of taxpayer money to try to find talent that we can't find. It's to let the private sector do what they do best, which is innovate. And really, in this case, go on offense.
My Canadian shows sometimes. Hermine, I'm curious to hear your perspective there.
Whoa, Chris is just like landed like a whole new area for me. I didn't even know it was in the Constitution. Shows you what kind of lawyer I am, right? But I do think that there's a sense in which the private sector, when incentivized correctly, will always act much more nimbly than the federal government can, right? That is absolutely true. And so I do think that there's real value in Chris's suggestion of allowing the right players, right? Like you go through some sort of license, I don't know what the privateer license is going to look like, but there's going to be some sort of regime where you would be incentivized to build out that kind of knowledge base and expertise and act really quickly. I'll tell you, just at Coinbase, when I was there, right, we have a really expert set of intelligence team members at Coinbase doing a lot of incredible work. And I think that if we were to leverage that kind of talent more officially, huge benefits.
Yeah, a couple other. Oh, sorry. This is regulated activity. They used to have to post bonds. In crypto, we call it staking. Oh, and by the way, when you take back those prizes, some of it goes to the house. That's how you fund the strategic reserve. No cost to the taxpayer.
Chris, we got to get back to programming in just, I think, a minute and a half now. I'm going to ask you, what is that one big milestone you're looking out for as we move forward?
Well, for me, I mean, honestly, if we could get market structure done, that's a game changer. We'll see what happens as we go into the end of the year. And then I'm trying to slip in my privateers as part of that process.
Hermine, what about you?
If the Dems could just stop obsessing about Trump and all this like conflict stuff and actually start thinking about the technology and how it could help everyday people more, I feel like that would be a huge win for the ecosystem generally, right? Like, I do think that there is regulatory capture right now that's happening where the most well-heeled incumbents have an outsized voice in the pending legislation. And the Dems are just so obsessed with Trump that they can't see that that's what's happening.
Hermine, Chris, it is always a pleasure speaking with the both of you. Thanks so much for joining the program today.
Thank you.
Thanks.
That was Chris Perkins, President and Managing Partner at CoinFund and member of the CFTC's Global Markets Advisory Committee, and Hermine Wong, the lecturer at the Berkeley School of Law and former special counsel at the SEC.